Good morning, and thank you all for being here. My name is Ikwinder Gahir, and I am proud to be the Liberal candidate for Mississauga-Malton. As the home of Pearson Airport and the first and final destination for many immigrants, this riding is home to so many success stories. I couldn't be filled with more pride standing here today to say that my father's is one of them. Born in a mud house, into a family with relatively little, he came to Canada at the age that I'm at now. He worked many odd jobs before becoming a plumber. The plumber worked day and night, saved every penny, and started a business. That business started in this riding in Mississauga-Malton, still calls the riding home today after 16 years. That same plumber was able to send his son to a great school. And that same son stands here today before you with his name on the ballot. I look forward to being the voice of this community for Canadians new and old. I look forward to working with community leaders to chart a path for the young people here. And I look forward to working hard, period, for all Canadians. We're joined here today by many distinguished personalities. We're joined by the Honorable Omar Al-Gabra, who has led a long and distinguished career in public service. Omar has worked tirelessly for the residents of Mississauga and of Peel, and I thank him for that. We also have with us the Honorable Anita Anand, whose work as Minister of Public Services and Procurement has been vital in getting Canadians through the pandemic. She has been a bright light during this trying time. Finally, we are joined by a fierce advocate for what is right, even in the face of opposition. I'd like to thank him for his tremendous leadership and commend him for his resilience against misguided forces. Thank you for being a role model, the Right Honorable Justin Trudeau. Thank you. I'd like to invite Omar to the podium to say a few words.
Good morning. Thank you, Ikwinder. Let me start off first by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And I want to echo what Ikwinder said. Welcome to Mississauga. Let me just share the story with you. Prior to the pandemic, my friends and I used to argue whether government mattered in our lives, whether who is in government made a difference. But since the pandemic, that argument has been put to rest. Canadians saw firsthand what a difference it makes when a competent, decisive, compassionate government is in charge. They could compare it to other jurisdictions and they could see that our government was there to support Canadians. 1 out of 4 Ontarians benefited from CERB. 2.1 million jobs in Ontario were protected by wage subsidy. $1.8 billion saved small businesses and community organizations from bankruptcy. Canadians knew how important it was to have a government there for them. And while the opposition were filibustering or voting no confidence in our government was laser focused on acquiring vaccines for Canadians. And I want to take a moment to thank all Canadians who've rolled up their sleeves and got vaccinated. And I want to encourage those who are yet to be vaccinated to make their appointment as soon as possible. Vaccines are our best way out of the pandemic. Vaccines protect ourselves and our colleagues and our neighbors and our loved ones. Vaccines create safe workplaces, not only for those who work in them, but for their customers. And vaccines prevent against future lockdowns and help relaunch our economy. So with that, it is my honor now to introduce and ask my friend and colleague, Anita Anand, to come to the podium. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde, c'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. I want to say how happy I am to be joining you. I have to say, when I look at the bold and concrete plan in our platform, I couldn't be more proud to be a Liberal and part of this Liberal team. I first decided to run as a Liberal candidate in Oakville in 2019, 2 years ago. And at that time, no one knew that the pandemic would befall our country and our world. The Prime Minister appointed me to be the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, and I'm honored to hold the role. I had no idea that I would be responsible for procurement of multiple goods to protect Canadians during this pandemic. Our government has worked relentlessly to deliver for Canadians. We have climbed what I call 3 mountains. In the first mountain, we procured 2.5 billion items of PPE for our frontline healthcare workers. We made sure we put in place long-term contracts to deliver PPE over the course of months and years if necessary. And we also built up domestic production of PPE. Now 40% of our contracts by dollar value are with Canadian manufacturers. In the second mountain, we procured over 50 million rapid tests for the provinces and territories and Canadians at large. And in the third mountain, we secured the most diverse portfolio of vaccines of any country in the world. We ensured that those vaccines arrived before the end of July, 2 months ahead of schedule. How did we do that? We negotiated extremely hard, even after executing those contracts last August. We phoned our suppliers, we texted them, we emailed them, we were on it day and night because we knew that we needed to have Canadians' backs. That was my goal, that was our government's goal, and we were not settling for anything less than the best. In addition to ensuring that we are well prepared with vaccines here at home, we put in place contracts for boosters and any enhanced vaccine that may be approved by Health Canada so that anybody who needs a vaccine as recommended by NACI or other organizations, including provincial health officials, would have access to vaccines. And we didn't forget our commitment to the global environment either. We gave over 40 million vaccines to COVAX and contributed over $500 million. Why? Because our government believes in our global obligations as well as our obligations here at home. We are leading the G7, the G20, and the world in vaccine administration because we have Canadians' backs. And after all the progress that we have made, now is not the time to give up. Now is not the time to look away from the task ahead. We need to keep going because we cannot put in place the bold ideas in our platform, helping those who need a home, making sure we are addressing environmental degradation, keeping our economy resilient, making sure families have access to daycare. All of those bold and concrete ideas are so important for our country's future, but we need to end the fight against COVID-19 in order to put them into place. And that's what this government will do if re-elected, and this is what this Prime Minister will do for Canadians as a leader, and a leader that Canadians need now. And without further ado, it is my great honor, c'est un grand plaisir et honneur d'être ici avec lui, notre leader, Justin Trudeau. Merci beaucoup.
Bonjour tout le monde. Thanks, Anita. Anita has been our Minister of Procurement, but in other words, our Minister of Vaccines. Elle a travaillé très fort depuis le début de cette crise pour qu'on ait des vaccins. Elle s'est assurée qu'il y en aurait assez pour chaque Canadien Anita, merci d'avoir toujours été là pour nous. Et ensemble, on a préparé le terrain pour une relance économique forte. A big shout out as well to two strong voices for here in Mississauga. Iquinder, our next Liberal MP for right here in Mississauga, Malton, with an extraordinary, touching, but very, very Canadian story of getting to this point. And I look forward to seeing everything you're going to be able to accomplish for Mississauga, Malton, and for the country in the coming years. And of course, Omar Al-Ghabra, a leader not just in this community, but as Minister of Transport in keeping Canadians safe. Omar, whether by standing up for what people in Mississauga need to weather this storm, or for workers in the industry, you've been leading the way forward. As always, thank you, my friend. The last 18 months have been tough. And I know we're all looking forward to getting back to the things we love. Having your kids in school with their friends, reopening your restaurant to full capacity, and yes, taking a vacation with your family. We can get there. And the way we do is by finishing the fight against COVID-19 for good. Au moment où on se parle, les conseils de santé publique sont clairs. C'est mieux de ne pas prendre de vacances à l'étranger. Mais je sais qu'on a tous hâte de visiter nos amis, notre famille, de voyager d'un bout à l'autre de notre grand pays et, pourquoi pas, d'aller prendre un peu de soleil quand le froid va revenir. L'hiver dernier, on a dû prendre des décisions difficiles et travailler avec des compagnies comme Sunwing pour suspendre les vols vers l'étranger. C'était la bonne chose à faire pour protéger les gens. Mais en ce moment-là, et depuis, vous avez fait votre part. You've gotten vaccinated. And for those who haven't, make sure you do. You've worn your mask. You stayed home. You canceled your plans. And now, you want to get back to what makes you happy and know that you're not at risk and that your kids are not at risk as you do so. Canadians stepped up. They did the right things. They made those sacrifices. They held strong for each other. And we're getting closer to the time where all that hard work and sacrifice will come to fruition. But in the last year and a half, it's been hard for Canadians to know what's safe and what's not. Clearly, it's a good idea to wear a mask in a busy place. It's the right thing to do to get your vaccine. What about the things we love that we haven't been able to do for a while? Well, when it comes to travel, we have a plan to make sure you don't have to wonder about the risks. We'll ensure that everyone 12 or older on a plane or train is fully vaccinated. So if you get on a plane like the one behind me today, you won't have to worry if the person beside you or across the aisle from your daughter has had both doses. You know they have. And with an airline like Sunwing, which has shown leadership on vaccination for all employees, you'll be covered when the staff come around to help with tickets or baggage too. You won't have to wonder about the risks. Now, Aaron O'Toole has said he would rip up this commitment on vaccines. I think Canadians know that's precisely the wrong choice at the wrong time. Think about it for a second. Even as anti-vaxxers harass frontline healthcare workers, Aaron O'Toole still won't even make sure his own candidates are vaccinated. And in fact, on healthcare workers, I want to say this. Do you remember when we were all going out every day to bang on pots and pans to show support for our extraordinary heroes on those front lines, to support them? Those frontline healthcare workers who were the only ones standing between us and the virus in those early days, working long hours, sharing stories of exhaustion and despair and hope at the same time. They inspired us to be there for each other as Canadians, to step up for each other the way they were fighting for us every day at a time where we didn't have vaccines. Well, now they need our help. Because even as they deal with rising cases in unvaccinated people, they're surrounded and being protested and being harassed and hassled and blocked by anti-vaxxers who are harassing them at the hospitals in BC and Ontario and right across the country. They need Canadians to come together once again in support of them, to defend our frontline heroes, to support science, and above all, to get vaccinated. And as leaders, we need to do everything we can. Erin O'Toole, and yes, Yves-François Blanchet too, say they respect the choice of anti-vaxxers. Well, you know what? I respect yours. You've worked too hard. We're too close to the finish line to let the Conservative Party take us backwards to more lockdowns and to a slower economic recovery for everyone. Ask people working for an airline like Sunwing or anyone who owns a family-run restaurant, and they'll tell you that people won't show up if they don't feel safe. And that's not good for business. It just goes to show that vaccines don't only matter because they protect you. They also matter because they get our economy on track to rebuild. Alors c'est vraiment important de continuer d'aller de l'avant avec les vaccins. La position de M. O'Toole, c'est pas seulement mauvais pour vous et votre famille, c'est mauvais pour l'économie. Here in Ontario, you've made it clear that you want a proof of vaccination system to keep you safe and to get everyone back to better days faster. Well, I'm right there with you. We'll even foot the bill for provinces and territories to roll out strong vaccination-proof programs, because that's real leadership, and that makes a real difference. It's no coincidence that right after we made that commitment, Premier Ford finally stepped up. And I think we all know that that wouldn't have happened with Erin O'Toole sitting across the table from Doug Ford. What Mr. O'Toole is doing isn't leadership. He's applying that same logic, one that's beholden to special interest groups, to his other choices as well, not just vaccines. Promising the gun lobby to make assault weapons legal again, and then misleading Canadians about his position. Allowing his MPs to introduce anti-choice legislation and standing by while over 80 members of his caucus restrict a woman's voice to choose. Ripping up a $10 a day childcare agreements that we've signed right across the country. None of that is leadership. And none of it will help us either finish the fight against COVID-19 or build a better Canada. Mes amis, cette élection est très importante. On a un vrai plan, ambitieux et positif, et on est prêt à le mettre en œuvre dès maintenant. On Wednesday, I laid out our plan to move forward for everyone on health, on housing, on childcare, on climate. We'll keep standing up on vaccines for travel, just like we'll make sure you can find a family doctor. We'll make owning a home more affordable. We'll keep fighting for $10 a day childcare, including here in Ontario, so that kids can get the best start, parents can better balance work and family, and our economy comes roaring back as strongly as possible. And we'll take real climate action. The consensus is clear. From economists like Mark Jacquard to environmentalists like Andrew Weaver, we have the best plan on climate and on jobs. On va continuer de prendre des mesures concrètes pour lutter contre les changements climatiques et pour créer des bons emplois pour les années à venir. On va vous aider à traverser cette crise et on va rebâtir un Canada encore plus fort. Il faut en finir avec la pandémie une bonne fois pour toutes et pour ça, ça prend du vrai leadership. Nous, on va s'assurer que tout le monde qui prend un train ou un avion soit vacciné. On va prendre des mesures comme celle-là parce qu'on veut que vous soyez capable de recommencer à faire les activités que vous aimez et parce que ça va faire croître notre économie. On a fait beaucoup de chemin ensemble et je sais qu'on peut aller encore plus loin. On a une équipe expérimentée et on veut en faire encore plus pour être à la hauteur de vos ambitions. Mes amis, on est prêts à continuer d'avancer. The choice Canadians have to make in this election will take us through not just the next few years, but the next few decades. They matter. And I'm ready for the hard work. I'm ready for the hope. I'm ready to move forward for everyone. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. We'll start the question period for 20 minutes. One question, one follow-up. Une question, une sous-question, starting with CBC.
Mr. Trudeau, Travis Damraj, CBC News. Thanks for taking our questions this morning. You say the process was rigorous to clear Raj Saini, but the process was that Saini engaged an HR consultant to do the workplace assessment, and that did not include interviewing the complainant. How is that rigorous, and can you say with absolute certainty that you know the multiple allegations against Mr. Saini to be false?
I think Canadians know that we have always acted decisively on showing that we don't tolerate sexual misconduct or harassment. Not only that, we acted to put in place much stronger, more rigorous processes in Parliament, within our party, and within organizations across the country. We will always make sure that we are standing up for people's rights and supports for them as they come forward to be heard, to make sure that there is a process for them to follow. We will make sure that that process is rigorously and independently followed. Okay. Les gens savent très bien que j'ai toujours agi pour démontrer mon intolérance pour l'harcèlement et l'intimidation. Non seulement ai-je agi dans différents cas au fil des années, mais j'ai agi pour transformer et améliorer les processus à l'intérieur du Parlement, à l'intérieur de nos partis, à l'intérieur des lieux de travail à travers le pays. Oui, il reste encore plus à faire, mais on va toujours s'assurer qu'on est là pour écouter et entendre ceux qui s'avancent avec des préoccupations ou des histoires d'actes inacceptables. Et on va s'assurer qu'il y ait un processus indépendant et rigoureux par lequel ils vont pouvoir passer.
Following up.
Mr. Trudeau, your answer didn't address the core of the question, but I do want to ask you about another subject. In 2015 and 2019, your platform pledged to lift the blood donation ban on men who have sex with men. That promise is absent from this platform, and Marcy Ian, your candidate in Toronto Centre, said just yesterday, quote, "I'm not even going to begin to defend this." If you are reelected, will you lift the ban, and if so, when?
We have said consistently, you're right, back since 2015, that the ban on blood donation, on giving blood for men who have sex with men, is unacceptable, discriminatory, and wrong. We made a commitment in 2015 to lift it. And we turned to Independent Blood Services Canada to say, okay, you need to get rid of that. And they said, we had all our research and funding cut by the previous Conservative government, so we don't have the data based on which to make that decision. So we funded the data. We funded the research they needed to make that decision, and we watched that decision go down from 5 years to 1 year to 3 months. And we are very, very hopeful, and we expect Canadian Blood Services to announce soon that that ban, the MSM blood ban, will be lifted shortly. It is something that we are working on, continue to work on, and something that we will ensure happens.
Prochaine question.
Oui, bonjour, M. Trudeau, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Le chef conservateur a dit aujourd'hui qu'il maintiendrait l'interdiction des armes d'assaut. Par contre, il ne dit pas s'il va financer un programme de rachat d'armes ou si les propriétaires actuels pourraient conserver leurs armes. Votre réaction, s'il vous plaît?
Son manque de clarté sur cet enjeu-là est malheureusement typique d'un chef qui dit une chose aux groupes d'intérêts spéciaux, que ce soit les groupes anti-choix, que ce soit le lobby des armes à feu, que ce soit ceux qui nient les changements climatiques, et il essaye de dire le contraire aux Canadiens. Il dit que non, ce n'est pas dans sa plateforme qui va bannir, qui va renverser notre interdiction des armes d'assaut. Et techniquement, c'est vrai qu'il dit ça parce que qu'il dit pas ça, parce qu'il dit qu'il va renverser la décision que nous avons prise pour bannir ces armes d'assaut. Donc, il dit quelque chose dans la plateforme que l'ordre au Conseil du 20 mai 2020 va être retiré, puis c'est justement cet ordre-là qui a interdit les armes d'assaut partout au pays. Sur quelque chose, un enjeu si important pour tant de Canadiens qui disent ce qu'il va faire. Et ce qu'il va faire, noir sur blanc dans sa plateforme pour le lobby des armes à feu, c'est qu'il va renverser notre décision de bannir, d'interdire les armes à feu de style assaut militaire. C'est tout à fait irresponsable. I think what we have here is a very concrete example of something that we see consistently from Erin O'Toole. He says one thing to special interest groups, whether it's pro-choice groups, anti-choice groups, or anti-vaxxers, or climate deniers, or the gun lobby, and then he tries to tell Canadians the exact opposite. He says very clearly on page 90 of his platform that he will reverse the May 2020 order in council by this government, the one that bans military-style assault weapons in this country. He will reverse our move to make it illegal to buy, sell, or use assault weapons in this country. And he got caught saying one thing to his friends in the gun lobby, and it's opposite to Canadians. That's not the kind of leadership Canadians need to finish this pandemic, to get our economy going again, or to move forward on things that matter deeply to Canadians, like gun control.
En suivi.
Et le NPD a présenté ce matin sa plateforme spécifique pour le Québec. Les conservateurs en ont une également. Pourquoi est-ce que vous n'avez pas de plateforme spécifique pour le Québec, M. Trudeau?
Tout d'abord, pour le NPD, on aurait bien aimé voir leur plan pour le Québec avant, pour pouvoir en discuter et débattre hier soir. Je trouve ça bizarre qu'ils aient partagé ça le lendemain d'une opportunité qu'on a tous eu d'en parler à plus d'1 million de Québécois. Par rapport à notre plan et notre vision pour les Québécois, en tant que Québécois, je suis très fier de pouvoir le partager avec tout le Canada, pas juste avec le Québec. Parce que nos priorités de plus d'aide pour du logement abordable et pour aider les familles à s'acheter une première maison, c'est très pertinent pour les Québécois. Notre désir de créer plus de places en garderie à travers le pays, incluant 37 000 places au Québec, c'est très pertinent pour ces familles au Québec qui sont fiers du système de garderie que nous avons au Québec, mais qui ont encore de la difficulté à trouver une place pour leurs enfants qui attendent longtemps sur des files d'attente. On est là avec énormément plus d'ambition qui bâtit sur tout ce qu'on a déjà fait pour contrer les changements climatiques. Et c'est une grande priorité pour les Québécois, comme des investissements en santé qui vont aider nos aînés dans les CHSLD à avoir une meilleure qualité de vie, entre autres. C'est les priorités des Québécois, c'est les priorités des Canadiens. Et je suis très fier qu'on ait une plateforme qui, justement, rassemble et parle à tous les Canadiens d'un bout à l'autre de ce pays.
Next question.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Mr. Trudeau, last night in the leaders' debate, you said that if this election doesn't result in a majority government, that Canadians will be into another one, possibly within 18 months. I think a lot of people don't want to do that. If you are elected with only a minority mandate, will you commit, and I want a very straight yes or no here, will you commit to not triggering another election unless you lose the confidence of the House of Commons?
I think the question yesterday was about the average lifespan of a minority government in this country, which is about 18 months. We are committed to putting forward a very clear and strong plan that is aligned with what Canadians want, which is to get through this pandemic, including by supporting those almost 80% of Canadians who did the right things, who don't deserve to go back into lockdowns, who don't deserve to continue to be limited, who may want to take a vacation with their family this coming winter. And we are the only ones with a plan to get through this pandemic with real leadership. And that's not just good for the pandemic and health side of things. It's also what allows us to recover our economy, to recover jobs, and to make sure we are building better on climate change, on housing, on healthcare, and on childcare. These are the things Canadians expect. And as we saw last night, the differences between the different parties are stark and clear. And therefore, I am fully confident that Canadians will not choose to take Canada back, but choose instead to move forward for everyone.
Following up.
Let's look at the alternate scenario that Mr. O'Toole wins a minority government and you are, at least initially, leader of the opposition. If your party supports you, do you intend to stay on as leader of the opposition and potentially run in another election campaign?
I am not done fighting for Canadians. I am not done with the hard work Canadians expect for a better future for everyone. $10 a day childcare right across the country, which is not just a social program, but an economic program as well. Stepping up in the fight against climate change with the strongest and most ambitious plan that Canada has ever seen, way ahead of the other parties by independent analysts. These are the things that Canadians expect. These are the things that I will keep fighting for. Je n'ai pas fini la lutte pour un Canada meilleur. C'est ce qui m'a animé à tous les jours pendant ces longs mois de cette pandémie. Ces moments difficiles où on voulait réellement être là les uns pour les autres et passer à travers ça, et on l'a fait ensemble et on a à finir le travail. Nous avons un pays extraordinaire, extraordinaire à cause des gens qui ont toujours été là les uns pour les autres. Et moi, j'ai fait une promesse d'être là aussi longtemps que ça prendrait, avec toute l'aide nécessaire pour passer à travers, et je vais continuer de le faire.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Catherine Lévesque, la presse canadienne. Vous faites une affirmation depuis le début de la campagne que vous avez répétée il y a quelques minutes à l'effet que les 6 milliards pour les garderies aideraient Québec à créer 37 000 places. Or, cette entente a été faite sans condition, donc l'argent pourrait servir à n'importe quoi. Pourquoi est-ce que vous répétez cette affirmation qui n'est pas tout à fait vraie?
Parce que c'est exactement ce que François Legault a dit quand il était à côté de moi, que ça allait pouvoir créer 37 000 places en garderie. Les 6 milliards de dollars qu'on transfère sans condition, dans une entente asymétrique, reconnaissent que les cibles qu'on a fixées pour les familles à travers le pays, 10 $ par jour, plus de places, plus d'aide pour plus de paye pour les éducatrices et les éducateurs, c'est des conditions qu'on avait mises partout au pays que le Québec a rencontrées depuis longtemps. Ils ont une moyenne de 8,5 $ par jour pour les centres de petite enfance. Donc, on n'avait pas à imposer aucune condition pour le Québec et on ne l'a pas imposé. Mais en même temps, et M. Legault et moi-même et tous les Québécois reconnaissent qu'il y a encore trop de familles québécoises qui sont sur des listes d'attente pour des garderies, qui ont de la misère à trouver des nouvelles places. Et M. Legault propose d'utiliser une partie de ce 6 milliards de dollars pour créer 37 000 places en garderie et je trouve que c'est une très bonne idée. Alors, je l'appuie pleinement. C'est tout à fait dans sa juridiction. Il n'y a pas besoin de mon appui, mais je suis tout à fait d'accord avec lui qu'il fasse ça. Mais c'est aussi désolant de voir que M. O'Toole présente un plan qui non seulement ne créera aucune place en garderie à travers le pays, y compris au Québec, mais il va retirer ce 6 milliards de dollars qu'on s'était engagé à envoyer au Québec. Et c'est peut-être pour ça qu'il n'a pas partagé les chiffres liés à sa plateforme. Il ne nous a pas dit comment il va payer ses promesses et qu'est-ce que ça va coûter, parce que justement, il ne veut pas qu'on voit ce qu'il évite à tout prix de dire, noir sur blanc, qu'il ne va pas envoyer cet argent que les Québécois méritent d'avoir pour d'autres choses, incluant 37 000 places en garderie.
En suivi.
Si je peux juste insister, vous dites depuis le début de la campagne que vous allez créer 37 000 places en garderie. Donc, pourquoi est-ce que vous vous appropriez finalement cette réalisation avec
C'est de l'argent du fédéral qui va permettre à la création de ces 37 000 places. On voit et on sait que de créer plus de places en garderie, d'offrir des places en garderie abordables, de qualité à travers le pays, c'est la bonne chose pour les familles, c'est la bonne chose pour l'économie et on le sait parce que ça a été démontré depuis 25 ans au Québec. Mais oui, on sait qu'il y a encore des défis, même avec un système extraordinaire au Québec, il y a encore des défis pour plusieurs familles qui attendent sur de longues listes pour une place en garderie. Et je salue et je remercie au nom de tous les Québécois et tous les Canadiens, le leadership de M. Legault, qui va prendre de cet argent qu'on envoie pour faire le travail, pour créer ces 37 000 places.
Next question.
Hi, Paola Lurigio with the Canadian Press. So you're promising to create a federal vaccine passport for travel. At the same time, several provinces either have created or are creating their own passports for domestic use. So first of all, when is the federal passport going to be ready? And why wouldn't Canada want one standard passport for both purposes?
First of all, as people know, their health data, their records of vaccination, is delivered by the province. Provinces have people's health data, have their records of vaccination. The federal government doesn't have records of who is vaccinated, who is not vaccinated. So on any federal initiative, we would need to work extremely closely with the provinces to either get those medical records or at least get that approval or that information that says, yes, this individual has been vaccinated. So before getting to a federal proof of vaccination to allow for international travel in something that could be aligned with and perhaps inserted in your Canadian passport, we have to work with the provinces anyway to get that information. And a number of provinces stepped up and said, actually, we'd like to create a provincial vaccination proof that would allow us to ensure that people using non-essential businesses like restaurants or gyms can easily show a proof of vaccination to make sure that they know that they're safe for the person on the treadmill next to them. So we said, excellent, let's do that together. And as you make that provincial proof of vaccination, we'll add a federal element of certification so you can show it at international airports around the world and use it for international travel. It is an interim measure that will be very good for the next year or so, easily, while we prioritize the things that are going to keep Canadians safe. We will be bringing in that more formalized version in the coming months or year, perhaps. But the priority is giving people a solid document that will allow them to do both things, both engage provincially in local businesses, knowing that they're safe from the people at the next table, and travel internationally with something robust enough and approved by the Government of Canada that it'll be accepted at airports around the world. Nous savions que ça allait être important d'avoir une preuve de vaccination pour que les Canadiens puissent voyager à l'international. Mais avant de pouvoir créer une certification fédérale, il fallait qu'on travaille avec les provinces parce qu'évidemment, l'information sur le statut et les détails de vaccination de chaque individu, c'est détenu par les provinces à l'intérieur de leur système de santé. Et quand les provinces, plusieurs provinces ont dit ben, nous, on aimerait créer un certificat de vaccination qu'on pourrait utiliser pour protéger les gens qui choisissent de faire des activités non essentielles, comme des restaurants, des bars, des gyms, d'autres choses. On s'est dit, excellent, faites ça, comme ça, on n'aura pas à se préoccuper de la vie privée des gens, on n'aura pas à prendre cette information de vaccination. On va pouvoir ajouter une certification fédérale de vaccination pour que dans les aéroports à l'international, ce soit un document provincial, mais suffisant pour pouvoir voyager à l'international. C'était la façon la plus simple, la plus rapide de le faire. Mais oui, on a l'intention de poursuivre avec une certification vaccinale qui serait plus formelle, plus insérée et compatible avec le passeport canadien. Mais ça devient une priorité secondaire puisqu'on a déjà quelque chose qu'on travaille avec les provinces qui va avoir le même but et la même efficacité par intérim.
Following up.
Some new COVID modeling is expected today, but we've already seen that recent trends show cases nationally increasing pretty significantly. So in light of that, are you comfortable continuing to campaign as you have and with your plan to further reopen Canada's borders to international travelers?
What we have seen is that closing in on 80% of Canadians have done the right thing. From wearing masks to keeping their distances throughout this pandemic, washing your hands 25 times a day, to getting vaccinated. For 80% of Canadians who've done the right things, we're on track to having a much better fall. But those who chose not to get vaccinated are now facing a fourth wave. A wave that puts them at risk, that risks overloading our healthcare systems across the country, and that also puts everyone else at risk of further lockdowns, of slower economic growth. And that's why we are unequivocal. And that's why the choice is so important in this campaign, because this decision is being made now. Do we go even stronger on vaccinations, as we propose to say that anyone in the coming months who wants to get on a plane like this and go on vacation will need to be fully vaccinated? That we will even pay for the rollout of vaccine certifications in provinces for non-essential businesses with a clear mandate. That we will ensure that people getting on trains, that federal public servants need to be vaccinated as well. Aaron O'Toole won't do any of that. He is not showing the plan we need to get through. And this conversation amongst Canadians right now, this choice Canadians are making in this election matters now. That's why this election is so important right now. Because the choice couldn't be starker about whether we continue with a strong plan to end this pandemic and keep Canadians safe, or whether we go backwards, get all loose, and run the risk not only of further impacts of COVID-19, on us all, but slower economic recovery and the lockdowns that interfere with that.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Laura Stone from the Globe and Mail. I just wanted to revisit Travis's question about the Saney situation. How can you say it's a rigorous process when the woman who's making these serious allegations says she's never participated in it? Like, how does that make sense to you? And should there be a new investigation into this?
I know how difficult this is because it's an issue that is so important, not just to the people involved, but to all Canadians. To make sure that everyone is in a workplace free from harassment, that has resources and recourses and processes that they can lean on. And I'm not going to get into the details of any one case here. That wouldn't be appropriate. But I can say that we have put forward strong, rigorous processes that are available, that are followed, that are in place to make sure that any complaint or concern that comes forward gets followed up on in the right way.
Following up.
So were the allegations ever sent to the Greenlight Committee? Were they substantiated? And do you think there should be a new investigation into this?
As I've said, this is an area that we as a party have always taken extremely seriously, that I have as a leader from the very beginning of my time as leader, has always taken very seriously and acted on. And we have strong, rigorous, independent processes in place to ensure that anyone who comes forward gets listened to, gets worked with, gets offered all the resources they need to be able to pursue, as far as they choose, these concerns, these allegations.
We'll take one last question.
David Aiken from Global News. $10 a day childcare is at risk. You've signed 6 deals. Apparently those are all going to be broken up. And they're at risk because you called a reckless election for no other reason than to further the political ambition of you and your party. You governed perfectly well with a parliamentary partner dressed in orange on climate action, childcare, all sorts of things. So if $10 a day childcare goes down the drain, I think there's a lot of parents in the country that might be blaming you for such a risky election. Comment?
First of all, I can't get over the fact that David Aiken just told me I governed perfectly well, but I will, I will move along from that. I think it is very clear through this pandemic that not only Canadians, not only families, but the business community recognizes how important $10 a day childcare is. And that's why 8 provinces and territories across the country stepped up to sign historic deals that are going to cut childcare costs in half within the next year and get to $10 a day childcare for families within 5 years, some of them much sooner than that. On top of that, we're going to be investing in early childhood educators, training and pay so that we have the best quality system out there. That is something that you're absolutely right, David, shouldn't be at risk. The provinces have signed, they've made an agreement with the federal government. We're moving forward on that. But Aaron O'Toole is making the decision that he is going to reverse those deals, scrap those deals, including the deal for Quebec. Deals that send billions of dollars to create childcare spaces for Canadians. That doesn't make any sense, but that's not my choice. That is Aaron O'Toole's choice to propose that direction. Any other government or any other option might have said, we will respect the deals in place and move forward in a different way for those provinces that haven't signed on to those deals. That's what a normal opposition party might say. There were deals signed, we respect those. But that's not what Aaron O'Toole is saying. He's saying, no, 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 those deals won't apply anymore. We'll go back on those, we'll rip them up, and we'll bring in instead measures that won't create a single space in childcare across the country. That's part of the choice Canadians are facing. And if Canadians don't want $10 a day childcare, well, that's part of the choice they get to make in this election. The conversations I've had with people, particularly through and coming out of this pandemic, where people understand how important it is to have safe, quality, available, affordable childcare spaces for their kids, that has become an election issue because Erin O'Toole doesn't want Canadians to have safe, affordable, accessible childcare spaces.
Following up.
Yes, and just earlier in your remarks, you praised Sunwing as an employer for requiring its employees to be vaccinated. Can I get your details on how, as the federal government, as the employer, is going to mandate that the federal workforce is going to be vaccinated? Because it sounds to me like your idea to negotiate with the unions is pretty much the same as Erin O'Toole's idea. So tell me how you will mandate federal workers to be vaccinated.
One of the fundamental differences on ending this pandemic for good is that we have a clear and strong plan, and Erin O'Toole doesn't. You'll see anytime Erin O'Toole talks about workplaces or even his own candidates, which he won't require to get vaccinated, he says, oh yeah, but we'll use testing as an alternative to vaccinations. Testing is not an alternative to vaccinations. Yes, it's an important measure that can be additional, that is part of how we get through COVID-19, this COVID-19 pandemic, used properly, and that's why Anita has procured millions upon millions of rapid tests for the provinces. But testing is not equivalent to vaccination. That's what Erin O'Toole refuses to step up on. So no, testing won't be an alternative for the federal workforce. People need to get vaccinated. That is what we have a strong and clear plan for, not because we're trying to punish people, because we're trying to keep Canadians safe. The 80% of Canadians, almost 80% of Canadians who did the right thing and got themselves vaccinated and want to protect their kids 12 and under who can't yet get vaccinated from those who choose not to get vaccinated. People are free to make their choices. But when their choices put at risk our kids, our economy, a government needs to show leadership. That's what we're doing. That's what the Conservatives won't.
We're squeezing 2 local questions before ending this.
Of course.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Natasha O'Neill, the Pointer. The GTA West Highway has been opposed by environmental groups, Regional of Peel Council, Mississauga Council, and it will destroy a lot of the valuable Greenbelt land. I understand this is a provincial matter, but do you personally oppose the construction of this highway? I would like a yes or no. Thank you.
Being a provincial matter, makes me very cautious about giving a direct answer, but I think Canadians can see the level to which we are committed to protection of our lands and of our coastal areas. We went from 1% protection of our coasts to 14% and are on our way to 30%. We're doing the same for land areas. We are committed to doing the right thing, protecting the environment, and we will always stand up for that rigorous environmental approach. But I think on that, I'm happy to turn to one of our local MPs who can bring the position of the Liberal Party on this local issue. Omar or Anita, you guys, Omar?
Well, Prime Minister, you are accurate, and I would just want to add that the Minister of Environment, Jonathan Wilkinson, is conducting an environmental assessment review of this project. So as we've committed to Canadians that we're showing a diligent and a rigorous environmental assessment process. So we'll have to wait and see what the outcome of that assessment.
Thank you. We'll take one last question.
Morning, Richard Warnica from the Toronto Star. You've promised a suite of things to make housing more affordable in this election, including penalties for house flipping. But in Vancouver, you're running a candidate who has bought and sold, I believe it's 21 properties within a year of buying them since 2005. Why should people in the GTA or elsewhere take you seriously on housing affordability if in what is arguably the most overheated housing market in the world, you're running a literal house flipper?
I think Canadians have seen over the past number of years how seriously we as a government have taken the housing crisis. I mean, 2015, when we took over, the Conservative government had removed any engagement by the federal government into housing. They didn't see it as a federal issue. We disagreed, and quite frankly, Canadians disagreed when they elected us to office in 2015. And in 2017, we put forward a historic national housing strategy that has seen hundreds of thousands of families get into new homes over the past years, has reduced chronic homelessness, made housing more affordable for everyone. But we know there is much more to do. That's why we're moving forward with measures that'll make it easier to save for a down payment and allow first-time home buyers to get into the market, particularly young families. We're working with municipalities to see the creation of over 1.4 million new homes in the coming years. And we're bringing in a home buyer's bill of rights that makes sure people are going to be protected from unfair practices like blind bidding or foreign investors or other things that have been unfair and overheating the housing market. This is the leadership that we're showing. It's the commitment we're making to Canadians. It's based on strong actions in the past and even stronger actions in the future. And all of our candidates stand by that vision.
Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. Merci, Mr. Trudeau. This is what ends today's presser.
Merci tout le monde.